Today, in episode 211 of the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, we speak to leadership career expert Mark Herschberg, and he's going to tell you how you can not only elevate your career, but your teams. Are you ready for this? All right, let's do it. Welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, a weekly podcast series dedicated to helping you hit peak performance across the three domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. This podcast couples my 20 years of military experience as a senior Canadian Army officer with world-class guests to bring you the most complete podcast of leadership going. And for more, feel free to check out our website at movingforwardleadership.com. And with that, let's get to the show. Yes, welcome one, welcome all. It is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and thanks for tuning into today's episode. It's all about your career today, and not just your career, but your team's career. Why? Because, they're intrinsically linked. If you are successful, your team will be successful. If your team is successful, then you will be successful. You guys are linked throughout your time together. And today's guest, Mark, has written a book on all that. In fact, it's called The Career Toolkit. So it doesn't matter if you're a CEO or an entrepreneur, an exec or a professional, or you don't even have a leadership title at all. This episode is going to be for you because it's all about how we are going to manage our career today. Mark is a graduate of MIT. He spent his career launching and fixing new ventures at startups, Fortune 500s, academia. He's developed all kinds of new software languages, online marketplace, new authentication systems, a lot of IT related stuff. Obviously, having an MIT background, but really what his niche or his sphere of genius is what he refers to as the Career Success Accelerator, which he's been teaching for 20 years. In today's episode, we talk about what it means to upskill your team, how to effectively do that, how to how to efficiently build a network, the essential elements of a high-performing team, how to get a potential candidate hooked on a job, which, as we know, with the Great Resignation today, it's really important to grab our people and get them wanting to sign on with us, and then keeping them. And then finally, we talk a bit about workplace conflict, and all this is all about helping you achieve greatness through your career. So this episode is definitely timely with the Great Resignation that's ongoing, different conflicts that are going on. We have political divide, we have divide over COVID, we have divide over the war in Europe right now in Ukraine, and really it's about bringing us together and as well helping us all move forward towards our goals and what our goals are. So with that, I think that's enough for me for today. So why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation about your leader career toolkit with Mark Herschberg. Mark, welcome to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, sir. So good to have you here tonight.
Thanks for having me on the show. It's my pleasure to be here.
So interesting, you wrote a book called The Career Toolkit, geared towards, leaders, a lot of people who are growing up per se in their careers. So let's kick off, what drove you to write this book in the first place?
Good question, because it doesn't seem like a natural fit given where I came from. When I graduated MIT in the 90s, I started as a software engineer. And early on, I realized I wanted to become a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. As I looked at what that meant, it wasn't just about being the best engineer. Yes, I needed those skills. I needed to be good at them, but I also needed other skills: leadership, networking, negotiating, communication, team building, and no one ever taught me these skills. So I had to develop it in myself. And as I learned them, I realized these are not just for the most senior people, they are for everyone in the organization. We all benefit when the most junior people even have these. So I began to upskill my team. And as I was doing this, MIT had been surveying companies and found out they were asking for the same skills, not just among the people they hired from MIT, but in everyone they hired at all levels. These were the skills MIT and other universities found were being asked for by employers. And when MIT heard this, they decided to create a program to help teach these skills. When I heard about it, I reached out. I said, I've been developing some material for my group. Happy to share it with you. And I thought that would be the end of the conversation. But MIT asked me to stay on and help design the course, and then asked me to help teach. So for the past 20 plus years, in addition to my primary career as a CTO building tech startups, helping Fortune 500s who want to innovate, I've had a parallel career teaching at MIT and elsewhere, and of course, the speaking and now the book and the app.
No, that's neat. One thing that you hinted at there, and that was upskilling your team. And here at the Big Performance Leadership Podcast, we talk about 3 domains of leadership. One, leading yourself, which is definitely in this alley, right? And how taking care of yourself, making sure your skills are up to date, and so on and so forth. 2, leading your team, which is the individuals within your organization, the people that you directly supervise, manage, etc. And then finally, it's leading your organization, i.e., the institutional bit. MIT, for example. So when you say upskill your team, what exactly do you mean there? And then the following question: how did you go about doing that for the audience?
Great questions. Upskilling the team means having everyone get better. So let me give you an example. I often use negotiations to explain how small improvements can have a big outcome. Imagine, for example, you're 25 years old and you have a job offer for $60,000. But instead of accepting that job, you negotiate. You've read my book or a different book. You're not the world's best negotiator, but you know something about it. And so you negotiate and get 61,000. That's not a huge push. If you take that job for $1,000 more, it took you 5 minutes of negotiation, you take that job, if you do nothing else in your career, and you just got yourself $1,000 more for 40 years. In 5 minutes, you earned $40,000. But of course, you're not going to stay in that job for just a year. You're going to have promotions and other jobs. Excuse me, for 4 years, you'll have promotions and other jobs. And of course, you're going to earn a lot more than $40,000. Learning to get a little bit better at negotiating can add hundreds of thousands of dollars to your career. Now, I use negotiations as the example, but of course, this is true for networking, for leadership. No one says you're a better networker, here's more money, but it gets us more opportunities, more advancement, more customers. So, all of these skills getting just a little bit better can generate significantly more success. Now, then people say, oh, but wait a second. A leader, a company owner, I'm hearing if I teach my team to do better, all of a sudden everyone starts getting $1,000 more. Wait, what's happening to my pocket? Now, here's the thing. Imagine everyone's better at negotiating, just a little bit better. They all start asking for $1,000 more. But they're also negotiating with your partners, your customers, your suppliers. They negotiate with each other all the time. We often negotiate with coworkers, and it's not a zero sum game. By making them better negotiators, yes, they're going to ask for more money, but they'll have done such a good job expanding the pie, there are bigger pieces for everyone. And so when we upskill our team to make them better negotiators, better networkers, better communicators, better leaders, it makes it better for everyone.
I really like that example that you're using with negotiation because I actually just recently finished Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, which, as you probably are aware of, is all about negotiation. So that's a great use of the example there because Chris goes into those similar lanes of expanding the pie and developing our people in negotiation skills along with ourselves.
I'm
So
going to
I
say
really
one thing
enjoyed
about
it.
Chris's book.
Go
I know
ahead.
it's very popular. There are, I think, better books for business people. Now, he is a fantastic negotiator, and if anyone I know is kidnapped, he's the guy I would call. He's certainly better than I
Absolutely.
am at that. But that is what he focused on. When you think about a hostage negotiation, you can't say, "All right, everyone, it's been a long day. Let's just call it a day. We'll start fresh tomorrow." Doesn't work that way. Emotions run very, very high. You have issues like you can't split the difference. You can't say, "All right, you kill three, we'll take three, call it a day." And that's why his book never split the difference. He can't in the nature of his job. But in what we do as business people, I'm not saying split the difference. You don't ever say, "Oh, let's just call it a split," but you do compromise. And that's okay. You can say, "You know what? Emotions are running hot right now. Hey, let's all just take a little break, or let's circle back next week." A lot of negotiations are done by email these days. And so a lot of his techniques, while certainly they're good, it's a little more emotionally real time oriented. Whereas some of the other books that I list on my website, I reference them in mine, I list others for people who want to go deeper, are more business oriented and less taking that emotional approach. And so I think are going to be a little more relevant for people.
Oh, some valid points there for sure. We could probably get into the negotiation debate a little bit, but not what the episode's about. So let's move along. But still, let's go back. Let's circle back to upskilling the team, and with that example of negotiation. So, how are some ways that leader can actually implement? Some tactics, some strategies that leaders out there can implement upskilling their team. How would they actually go about it on a day-to-day basis?
To do that, you first have to understand these skills are different in terms of how we learn them. Most of our education, we sat in class and someone stood at the board and said, "Here's the formula. Here are the dates. Here are the things to memorize." And on the test, you just spit them right back out. And that's fine for how we learn lots of things. And by the way, that's how books work. That's how podcasts work. Someone says something, you go, "Okay, that's a good point. I got to remember that." These skills are more akin to learning a sport. I can't teach you how to play basketball or curling or anything else just by explaining it or just by giving you a book. You have to do it. You have to try. You have to experience it. Even if I explain the physics behind how you shoot a basketball, that court sense, that being on the court and having the pressure of the opposing team and 3 seconds on the clock, that plays into it. And you just can't explain that. You have to experience it. So that's true of these skills. Now, we unfortunately, unlike sports where we say, well, let's drill, let's scrimmage, we don't have all the options. I can't say, "Hey, everyone, I'm going to practice doing some leadership this afternoon. And if I screw it up, just forget it all. It doesn't count. It was just scrimmage leadership. We'll call it do-over." That's not how it works. So here's what we can do. We can create peer learning groups. And I recommend groups of about 6 to 8 people in size, but you can scale it up if you want to. And by the way, if your company doesn't want to support you doing this, go create a local meetup group, go get other people external to your company. Because in fact, you want diversity of thought. So if you do this in your company, don't just say all engineers in this group, all salespeople in that group, mix it up. Then what you want to do is take some content. Yes, you can use my book, and I show you how you can divide up pieces of my book for new hires, for new managers, for different types of goals. But if you don't want to use my book, use a different book, one of the many others I recommend. Use a book you love, use an article, a video, use a great podcast like this one. And the point is, you get that content, you read those pages or you listen to the episode, and then you discuss it. Because it's in that discussion where we talk about, let's say, leadership, and you're going to have a different perspective than I am. You say, "Wow, Scott, I never thought of it that way. Thank you. That's a good point." You might say, "Mark, I am facing this leadership challenge, and here's what I'm thinking of." I say, "Oh, that's interesting. Well, how would I approach it?" This is a chance to scrimmage. This is where I can think about a real world situation and what I would do. And maybe someone else jumps in and she says, "Hey, here's what I did in the past, and here's what worked and didn't work in a similar situation." So we can learn from her experiences. We can also do drills, and that's where you bring in, for example, a case study. which you can get from business schools, and we can practice negotiating against each other or leading a hypothetical. So by creating these peer learning groups, you can gain some of that real world experience, but in a safe area, in a scrimmage practice way. And that's really the best way to learn. That's how we teach it at MIT. That's how top business schools teach it. And that's how you and your team can learn it. And there's no cost.
Wow, thank you for all that, because I recently launched the Leader Growth Mastermind, which is exactly all of that. You just completely described what we do in the mastermind. So for the leaders out there who go, wow, that's a really great idea, and I don't have access to that resource. Bull, you do. Go to movingforwardleadership.com/mastermind, and there you have access to said resource, less the last part that you said, free. However, for $29 a month, I would argue it's not that much. And that's exactly what we do there. So thank you, Mark. I was grinning ear to ear the whole time, because I just like, yes, that's exactly what we're doing. We are taking content, we're dissecting it, we're discussing it, we're learning, talking about how we can apply to our individual areas. And as a group, we're rising, our boats per se, to lifting the tide so all boats rise together. And that's the whole goal. So I appreciate that indirect plug.
And when you do the math, you say, okay, $29 a month, it's a couple hundred a year. But wait a second, if that helps me get that $1,000 more, because you become a better leader, you have a better network, this thing will pay for itself very quickly. You will get a huge
100%.
ROI on it.
100%. Amazing. Now, in your book, you talk about different essential elements of a high-performing team. So obviously, this was all about learning, a learning atmosphere that you talked about. What are some of the other essential elements of a high-performing team, in your opinion?
You want a team that learns first and foremost, as you said. And there are standard techniques you can use. A lot of these come from lean manufacturing, from agile software engineering, standard feedback cycles. And I go into those and other similar ones. But when it really comes down to think about managing modern teams, you need to focus on information flow. This is very important. Our original early theories of management came out of basically managing armies. Those were the biggest things we had a couple centuries ago. Or then you had the factory floor. And the idea was, well, I'm the manager and I'm going to tell you what to do. You turn that screw, you hit that nail, do it faster, do more. And that was it. But in today's world, I can't do that. I can't say, you move that image slightly to the left on the PowerPoint. I can't micromanage the way we used to. In fact, we don't even as managers have all the information. I'm a CTO. I'm a very technical guy, but I don't know the most about that database, that server, that language. My software engineers are better experts in some of the details than I am, perhaps than anyone else on the team. Someone is the expert, and it's not necessarily the most senior person. And so I don't come in and say, I'm going to tell each of you what to do and you do it and then get back to me when you're done. I say, hey, team, this is what we need to do. I need your help figuring it out. And my job as a manager is to enable the team to do that, which means who has what question, who needs what information at what time, and making sure I manage that information flow, that the right people have the right information at the right time. That is the essence of modern management.
Love it. Absolutely love it. I often say that we are our people are the reason for our team's success. However, we, the leaders, are the reason for its failure. And effectively, that's very much along the same lines of what you're getting at, right? As leaders, we need to make sure that they have all the tools, skill sets, so on and so forth, to be able to do their job. And ultimately, your job is to, one, prioritize, two, delegate effectively, three, give them vision and inspiration to keep the team moving in the right direction, and then ultimately, make some hard decisions sometimes. But you're not going to be the expert of everything out there. And long gone are the days where the leaders are the know-it-alls. Far as I'm concerned, I'm actually, a dumb guy as a leader. I don't know anything, but what I do know is, to build, I know how to weigh pros, cons, priorities, look at different factors and stuff, ask questions, not have answers, to, get the information out of my team so that I can then turn around, make a decision, and point them in the direction we need to go. So really enjoy what you're talking about there.
One of the examples I give in the book, I always think of the org chart upside down. And the reason I do that is because imagine if you got rid of everyone who is a manager and you just had the employees. It will be disorganized. It will be chaotic, but they'll do something. They'll still produce reports, write software, create ad campaigns, whatever it is. It just won't be efficient, maybe not as good as it could be. On the other hand, if you got rid of every one of the employees and just had those managers, what would we do? We'd sit in meetings all day and send emails to each other, and we wouldn't actually produce anything. It is typically the non-managers who do the actual work, who create the value that goes to the customers. Our job is just to coordinate that.
No, absolutely. 100% agree. Yeah, awesome. So let's talk about some, section 3 of your book. Interpersonal dynamics is what you refer to it as. Now, we talked a little bit about negotiating, but effective or efficiently build a network. And this is, I'm going to do probably a shameless plug here for podcasting, but that networking aspect has been like, of everything, that has been the true home run for me as a podcaster. I get to network with people from across the globe, as we talked before we hit record on this. Now, for leaders out there, how can they go about efficiently building a network so that they can turn around and leverage it, down the line?
So you gave us a hint to that answer by what you just said about how with podcasting, that silver lining, you do the show for various reasons, but what a nice bonus that you get to meet and build relationships with all these people. I've had the same thing. I don't have my own podcast, but as we were talking about earlier, I've gone on nearly 300 shows at the time of this recording, and I have met all sorts of people all around the world. Many of them I've started to build relationships with. Not all of them, but many, and that's expanded my network. The wrong thing to do is to think about, oh, how can I collect a bunch of business cards? How can I just meet lots of people? I go to a networking event. I'm going to come back. I'm going to have 20 business cards. Look at me. I've networked. That's not networking. That's adding to your address book, but that's not a true relationship. Think about if you go to the bar tonight and you're out there and you start talking to some other folks. You go, oh, hey, yeah, you guys are a lot of fun. Hey, listen, this weekend I got to move. So why don't you guys all come over to my place, help me pack up, carry my couch down 3 flights of stairs? Come on, who's in? Say, hey,
pizza, beer, and a lift, right?
Yeah, this has been fun tonight, but I ain't coming to your apartment. We ain't that close friends. But if you call up your friends from college and say, hey, listen, I need a favor. I'm in a real bind. Can you come over, help me pack up? They'll say, of course I can. I'm here for you. And the difference is because in that second case, you have a real relationship as opposed to someone you just met and casually knew. So when we think about networking, so many people expend a lot of energy just collecting those business cards or just collecting those connections on LinkedIn. But when you actually need something, that relationship isn't there for you. So we want to focus on building relationships. And the good news is this is something we all do naturally. And a common question I get, well, I'm an introvert. I don't like going into those big rooms. Okay, fine. I'm an introvert too. You don't have to be in that room with 300 people collecting cards. You do have to meet someone. You're meeting people one-on-one with every podcast that you do, and then you can get to know them. We're not in some big room. It's just you and I talking. And that's how you build relationships. We all know how to do that, and you can build them one-on-one, even if you're an introvert.
Absolutely. Quality over quantity is something I often say. I literally said it to you again before we hit record on the episode. But having quality relationships is how you build the network, and then it expands indirectly, right? And so, for example, I built a relationship with former guest, and then all of a sudden we had a great relationship. I helped him out in a couple different ways. He had a great episode, came back actually twice. And then all of a sudden, I start getting introductions from them. And they're like, hey, you want to go on Scott McCarthy's show? You got to go on it. And hey, Scott, you got to talk to my friend Joe. Joe would be a great great interview for you, and so on and so forth. And, hey, sure, let's talk about it. And then I actually have another show where we reciprocate guests because we networked and we met each other. So his show somewhat overlaps with my show. Mine somewhat overlaps with him, but they're not like completely synced. So occasionally, like, hey, I got a great guest that would be, fit for your show. And he's like, great. Who can I introduce you from my show? And I'll have a quick look like, oh, yeah, that one would be a good one. Okay. And then we do this back and forth all the time because the quality of the network, the quality of the time that we spend with each other. And guess what? None of these people have ever actually met face to face in real life. They're all been like you and I right now.
So you hit on part of the secret on how I got on so many shows is that at the end, I offer up other guests to the shows because I know other authors, other podcast guests, other entrepreneurs, and then I often get referred in. And it's a great way to very efficiently, if I do a good job on your show, you'll be happy to send me to someone else, and vice versa. I'm happy to send people to you. So your networking can really, at very low cost, get you going. And for people saying, well, I don't have a network, I'm having coffee next week with a guy I interviewed, I think about 12 years ago. Now, he came in, he interviewed, it wasn't a right fit. But I thought, this guy's pretty good. I like this guy. Not a fit for this job. He didn't think we were the right company for him, but we kept in touch. And occasionally we talk, and he just reached out. I haven't seen him in person in I don't know how long, but he said, hey, I'm thinking of getting a new job, would love to catch up and have coffee. This is a guy I met during an interview, because to me, interviews are not just about finding jobs. Interviews are a great place to network. So everywhere you go, if you think of it as an opportunity to network, you're going to expand your network. The only thing I don't really focus on for networking is networking events. I don't go to anything that says, we are a networking event, come here, exchange those business cards. But everything else, whether you go to, let's say, your religious services, your kid's soccer game, you go to an interview, you go on a podcast, every opportunity, everywhere you go, it's a chance to build a relationship with someone. And that's how you increase your network.
That's awesome. I absolutely love it all. Now you mentioned interviews a couple times there, and we've kind of glazed over it. However, I do recognize that it is part of your book, and it's an important aspect of leading because right now the Great Resignation is on. A lot of people out there, a lot of members of my free Facebook group have issues with filling staff vacancies. A lot of members of the mastermind, the paid mastermind community, are having the same issues. Right? They got vacancies and they're interviewing people. How can leaders out there now use the interview to their advantage to get people hooked in, pending it being a right fit, obviously, because you'd rather not have someone than have our completely wrong fit. But, getting that person, oh, that'd be an awesome person, and hooking them in to bring them in to be part of your team.
Great question. Let's start with the following. When you next have a meeting with your team, whether that's your subordinates or your peers or your bosses, just say, hey, everyone, I'm really curious, who here, by a show of hands, has had any formal interview training on the hiring side? And if you're like most groups I speak to, you're going to have little or no hands go up. If you think about it, that's crazy. Imagine if you have a 16-year-old kid and you say, hey, listen, you're old enough to drive, so here you go, here are the car keys. I know you've been in the car before. I've driven you. You get it. It's a steering wheel and there's a gas and brake. You've seen it. Okay, great. Good luck to you. Try not to hit anyone. Now, we would never do that with our kids. We never say, you kind of get the idea, best of luck. And yet this is what we do when we interview. We say, okay, well, we hired you and welcome to the team. Now we have to hire someone else. And hey, you've been in an interview before, right? You've seen it. I know you've been in one. So here you go. Best of luck. Try not to hit anyone. We give people no training, and then we turn around and say, well, people are our most important resource. If they're so important, let's focus on how to be effective in hiring them. So it begins by recognizing we have to train up in this skill. That's step one. We, meaning ourselves and everyone on the team, anyone involved in hiring. Now, the chapter I focus most of the chapter on the hiring manager side because I know you can find how do you answer this question in an interview and how do you update your resume. You can find that elsewhere. That's not what I cover in the book. It's how you hire other people. Now, in terms of how you really sell it, I have a blog post on this, and I'll probably have many more coming out. You need to recognize that hiring is selling. You are selling an open position. We talk about as a candidate, you have to sell yourself, and that's true. But as a hiring manager, as a company, you have to sell that position, especially in a buyer's market today. What I would recommend doing, and I've done this in the past, sit down with your marketing team and say, hey, how do we punch this up? Because if it's just a job description saying you need to know X, Y, Z, that's a grocery list. No one gets excited about a grocery list. But if you start out about the awesome things you'll do, whether it's things that your company will do, things that you'll do in your role, the culture, the opportunity, you're starting to sell. You're giving them more than a grocery list. You're telling them, here's the awesome meal you'll make with these groceries, right? That we get excited about. You have the little card that shows a picture of the food and you go, okay, yeah, I want to buy these ingredients. That's what you want to do. You want to market. So get your marketing team, get your sales team and say, how do we market? How do we sell these openings we have? And think of it as a marketer does.
Got to make it exciting, right? And that's, my background is Canadian Army. And I remember one of the recruiting posters of my time when I joined. It was the slogan. It had one of our armored personnel carriers on it, and the sunset in the background, and stuff like this, silhouette. And it said, "Say hello to the company car." Right,
Yeah.
and that's right, and that's what it was selling, the experience, and being out there and being driving one of these, what people would refer to as a tank. And I go, no, it's an ABC. But anyway, the moral of the story is, it's selling the experience. It's selling being out there, being in one of these things. It's selling, providing peace, security, all those different things. By simply saying, hey, you get a pension, you get a good paying salary, you get lots of holidays, blah 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 blah. No, focused on the experience, and that was a great thing. Although one of the things that hooked me in the end was all the benefits that it gave me. So great points, really great points. I think that's particularly important this day and age with the new workforce that's truly in now, that's getting more and more, millennials, they're getting more and more a larger footprint within the workforce. Their values are different than mine, yours, the Gen X's, whatever, because they value things such as what is the actual true mission and values of a company, an organization, what do they stand for, and all these different things. So if you don't actually hook them in with these intangibles almost, then you're going to lose your candidates.
We have to recognize that right now, during the Great Resignation, we are seeing the largest rewrite of the capital labor contract in a century. It is no longer just about, well, pay me money, and that could be as a bonus or equity or whatever, but just pay me some financial remuneration and I'll work for you. People are starting to say, yes, money's important, but I also want to align to your mission. I want to make sure it's a cultural fit. I want to understand my development and my growth and where I'm going. And so you have to offer them more than just, here's a pile of dollars. You have to sell them on multiple fronts. It's when you sell a car, you don't just say the car can drive you from A to B. You might sell it based on the excitement of driving a military vehicle. You might sell them based on the luxury, the awesome sound system, the reliability, the safety, the gas mileage. There's different ways you can sell it, but you're not just saying, oh, it drives and that's all you need to know. Likewise with the job, yes, we'll pay you and hopefully something good, but there's more things that you're going to be excited about and you have to recognize this. So we need to realize we have to have open conversations about cultural fit, about goals, about alignment. And now it's easier as a hiring manager because we can bring this up. For candidates, I actually wrote a blog post saying how to ask about corporate culture during an interview. And if you go to my website and go to that blog post, I have a number of questions that either side can bring up. And if you're not sure how to bring it up, the simplest thing is to say, hey, I was listening to this guy, Mark Herschberg, and he said these are questions we should go over. So let's run through this, because now it's not awkward. Now it's not, hey, why are you bringing this up? No one's talked about this before. This is weird. What's going on? You're saying, oh, I've been told, some career expert said this is a good thing to do, so let's do it. And that removes any awkwardness or any hidden agendas by doing it.
Yeah, I like it. And those are the tough conversations, yet they're necessary because at the end of the day, people need to feel like that they belong in the organization that they work for. As the former guest Tim Clark says, it's stage one of the 4 stages of psychological safety, and that they belong there. That they have that feeling that, yes, this is an organization that values me and I value what it values, etc. So, no, definitely like it. Mark, and wrapping up here, I do want to go into one more area, change it a little bit. Challenges as leaders, we often face them, difficult, conversations, conflicts in the workplace. I would definitely like to get your thoughts on there for the leaders out there and how they can go about these difficult conversations, difficult, conflicts between themselves, team workers, etc., so that they can be more effective.
Well, this goes back to learning those negotiation skills, because again, it's not just when you're sitting at the table negotiating salary. Conflicts are things that need to be negotiated. Now, it's hard to wave my hands and give general advice on what specifically to do without knowing the circumstances. But one of the most important things you can do is address it right away. Too many people think, well, that's not good and it's hard to bring up, and let me wait and see, and maybe it will go away by itself. It usually doesn't. Or you say, well, this person, he's got a review coming up in 8 weeks, so I'll just bring it up then. No, don't. Any feedback, good or bad, you want to deliver quickly. Now, that doesn't mean has to be right there on the spot. You might, if something happens Tuesday, you plan to talk to the person about it on Friday, or you set up a meeting. That's fine, within a few days, within a week. But you want to address things quickly, because when you do so, you can usually address the first mistake or address it when it's small. You can do these minor course corrections, because once you've gone further down the path, they've diverged a lot more. They've gotten more used to the pattern. The rest of the team has seen this behavior doesn't seem to be getting corrected. I suppose it's okay. So when you see an issue, when there's conflict, as hard as it is today, address it today, because it only gets harder tomorrow. And this is true whether you're dealing with an office conflict or, as we're seeing, geopolitical conflict. The sooner you deal with it, the less painful it will be down the road.
Every day that you avoided the gap of the conflict, because the conflict is essentially a gap of expectations or perceptions amongst two people. Every day you ignore it. Essentially, it grows. That gap grows from a multitude of reasons, but ultimately because you're actually accepting the conflict. You're enabling it by not addressing it. So for leaders out there, I truly echo Mark's words. You've got to address it sooner than later, because if not, it's going to get too big to the point where it's going to be out of control and it could bleed out in so many different ways across the organization. Mark, I thank you. Before we wrap up here, I do got a couple of last questions for you. First question being a question I ask all the guests here at the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, and that is, according to Mark Herschberg, what makes a great leader?
A great leader is someone who continues to grow, cares for her team, and creates goals that are achievable and ones everyone on the team can embrace.
That's awesome. Short, sweet, to the point, but yet effective. Final question of the show. How can people find you? How can they follow you? Shameless plug. It's all about you, your book, and your journey now.
You can go to my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. There you can see where to buy it, Amazon, and all the usual places. You can get in touch with me or follow me on social media. You can see more of my writing on the weekly blog posts I have. There is a free companion app available on the iTunes and Android stores. That's linked from the website, and it has a lot of the great content from the book that will basically, with the app, it pops up on your phone once a day at a time you set. You don't even need to open the app. That's going to help you retain the content by keeping it top of mind. And then there's the resources page I mentioned earlier, where there's a number of free resources, a bunch of free downloads, including how to create that peer learning group within your organization, how to ask these questions about company culture. So there's a whole list of questions. There's other free downloads. There's links to other free online resources, links to other books I recommend on topics. So other negotiation books, leadership books. So all those resources and everything else at my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com.
And for you listeners, easy as always, just go to movingforwardleadership.com/211, and the links are there in show notes. Mark, my friend, thank you again. Thank you for coming out, taking time out of your busy schedule, talk to me, but most importantly, the audience out there, sir.
Thanks for having me on the show.
And that's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. But you know what you could do to truly support the podcast? And no, that's not leaving a rating and review. It's simply helping a friend. And that is helping a friend by sharing this episode with them if you think this would resonate with them and help them elevate their performance level, whether that's within themselves, their teams, or their organization. So do that. Help me, help a friend. Win-win all around, and hey, you look like a great friend at the same time. So just hit that little share button on your app, and then feel free to fire this episode to anyone that you feel would benefit from it. Finally, there's always more. There's always more lessons around being the highest performing leader that you can possibly be, whether that's for yourself, your team, or your organization. So why don't you subscribe? Subscribe to the show via movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And until next time, lead, don't boss, and thanks for coming out. Take care now.